I'm Sagarika Ghose. I'm a journalist, a columnist and an author. My latest book is Why I Am a Liberal, a manifesto for Indians who believe in individual freedom. In this I lay out a case for liberal values in India, and I also argue that it is urgent that India adopt the liberal path or the liberal way of being. I'm talking to you today about social, cultural and religious articulations of liberalism and why we can draw liberal lessons from the traditions that India has, and also the manner in which liberal values are being expressed in the social, cultural and religious spheres. Let's start with religious articulations of liberalism. In the course of my talk, I will also refer to certain readings that I've done for my research, and you could also take a look at some of these readings because they will provide you insights into finding liberal lessons or finding liberal interpretations of the religious traditions of India, and particularly the Hindu religious traditions of India. Now, the reason why I'm emphasizing a little bit more on the Hindu religious traditions of India is because today there is a climate of Hindutva or political Hinduism, and I believe that in contrast to political Hindutva, which brooks no dissent, which brooks no disagreement, which designates ideological enemies like anti-nationals or urban Naxals or liberals or Khan Market gang. These are the enemies of so-called political Hindutva. But I demonstrate in my readings of certain other Hindu texts that in fact there is no such concept of the enemy within Hinduism. Hinduism is in fact a deeply individualistic, interrogating religion, which is much more liberal than it is non-liberal. In fact, the emphasis on the role of the Atma, the emphasis on the role of dialogue, the emphasis on the role of Vad, Vivad, Samvad is actually the very opposite of what the Hindutva forces are trying to impose. That is a culture of obedience, of dictatorial instructions, of state action. We can also see in certain readings that the Ram Rajya or the ideal kingdom of the Ramayana had nothing to do with state action or nothing to do with the big state or a state controlling the means of production or state control of the economy. In fact, the Ram Rajya was the just kingdom, the just society which facilitated individual freedom and facilitated business. So these are the readings we can draw from the Hindu texts, which I believe are the very opposite of what political Hindutva today is trying to do. Let me begin by reading out a quote from Vivekananda. To quote Vivekananda, "Freedom for the soul is the ultimate goal of Hinduism. We have got in our religion the provision of a personal God. The Hindu religion consists not in believing certain dictates or diktats or doctrines or dogma, but in spiritual verities like Atma, the soul and Brahma. The soul is the repository of all power and virtue. The soul or the individual is the most important starting point of Hinduism." So Hindu religious traditions are concerned in the most part about the Atma, the soul. Now, when you read Vivekananda or you read the works of S. Radhakrishnan, India's scholar president, who has done a magisterial amount of work on the Hindu religious texts, or you read the works of M. Hiriyanna, or you delve into the works of, say, Ram Mohan Roy, or even to some extent Jawaharlal Nehru, who is deeply concerned also with the teachings of the traditional texts, you will find a constant emphasis in Hinduism on the individual, the Atma. The Atma makes his own world or her own world. The seeker seeks alone. There are no set rituals, no church, no priesthood, no set mantra, no set dogmas, no set doctrines within Hinduism. It is entirely up to the individual to choose what she would like to believe, how she would like to practice these beliefs, what kind of mantras she would like to adopt, what kind of God she would like to worship, which shrine she would like to go to. So the Hindu is essentially an individualist. The Hindu is an iconoclast. The Hindu is even in many ways a spiritual anarchist, because there is no overarching structure or single church or single priesthood or single set of mantras that defines Hinduism. This is the essential attribute of Hinduism that Mahatma Gandhi drew from. Now, Mahatma Gandhi, who I have hailed in my book as the founding father in a way of Indian liberalism, although he may not have called himself a liberal, but if you study Gandhi's thought, you will find that within Gandhi there is an entire body of work that supports liberal values. And Gandhi drew his liberalism or his belief in individual freedom from the Hindu religious texts. For Gandhi, the individual was the foremost catalyst of change. Political movements were to be mounted by individuals. Every member of society was an individual affecting his or her own change within a personal transformation to create political transformation. Now this is very borne out by what the Hindu scriptures teach, that it is personal transformation, personal struggle that actually leads to moksha. Moksha within the Hindu tradition is the most individualist pursuit. Moksha is achieved by individuals. Moksha or salvation is never achieved in the Hindu traditions as a collective. It is entirely an individual pursuit, and this is what Gandhi drew out from the Hindu traditions first and foremost. Now, this is what Satyagraha was. Satyagraha was the inner war, the inner struggle to be your best self, the inner striving to be your best self. Satyagraha contained some very important laws that you had to follow in order to be a satyagrahi. You had to follow the laws of discipline, of politeness, of non-violence, above all, the charkha, vegetarianism. There were a whole set of laws that individuals had to follow in order to become a satyagrahi. Now, Satyagraha is not anarchism and not simply disobedience of the law for the sake of disobeying the law. According to Gandhi, it is only when you are loyal to a set of just laws, when you are following a higher law, when you are following the laws of ethics, when you are following the laws of morality, when you are following the laws of civility, that is when you have the right to break the law. You don't have a right to break the law if you are doing it simply for the sake of lawlessness. It is when you are following the higher law that you have the right, and to you accrues then the right to break the law. Now, this belief in individual struggle is what Gandhi drew from the Ramayana. Now, Gandhi repeatedly wrote in his collected works about the Ramayana and the Mahabharata that these are essentially inward-looking documents. The Mahabharata is the inner war between one's best and one's worst self. The two armies that fight in the Mahabharata are actually the good and evil that exists within each of us. And this is the inner war that needs to be fought. What did Gandhi say about the Ramayana, and what did Radhakrishnan also say about the Ramayana? Now, what is Ram? Ram is the God King, right? Ram signifies divinity. But does Ram have magical powers? Does he have supernatural powers? No, he doesn't. Ram is in fact a human being. And in fact, all his relationships are deeply flawed. He faces rejection from his parents. He has a fraught relationship with his life partner. He is estranged from his sons towards the end of the Ramayana. He faces inordinate difficulty in his emotional relationships, and he has a life of suffering and struggle. Yet Ram is divine because he is constantly striving for excellence. He's striving to be his best self. He's striving to be perfect. That is why he is Maryada Purushottam. Not because he's God, but because he is striving continuously to be his best self. And that is why the Ramayana evokes divinity within every human being. That every human being can be divine if they are struggling for their best self, if they're struggling for perfection, if they're striving for the best way to be. Life is not perfect. Life is full of difficult relationships. Life is full of moral and social dilemmas. And the Ramayana is full of moral dilemmas and full of social dilemmas about family life, about exile, about parents, about marital relations, about relations with your children, about the household, about war, about how to defeat your enemies. Yet in all these relationships, we see Ram striving to do the best thing, striving to do the best possible thing. Now there are many criticisms of Ram's actions, of how he defeated, for example, Vali in battle, or the killing of Meghnad, which was done in hiding. So there are many criticisms of Ram's actions. There may be flaws about Ram's behavior, but he is God because he's considered God because he is constantly striving. And that is the lesson that Gandhi drew from the Ramayana. Individual struggle, individual drive for perfection. Not perfection, but the individual drive for perfection. What else do we learn from the Hindu scriptural tradition? We learn the power of argument, of Vad, Vivad, Samvad. At every level, at every stage of the Hindu traditional texts, whether you look at the Upanishads, whether you look at the Bhagavad Gita, whether you look at the Mahabharata, there is questions and there are answers. Now in the Upanishads, we have in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which I have read in the Radhakrishnan translation, and I strongly recommend that you read the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad in the translation by S. Radhakrishnan, because it is a tremendously interesting translation, and the commentaries of Radhakrishnan, who says that, for example, in Hinduism you can be an atheist and still be a Hindu. There is no concept of God in the Upanishads. It is entirely the workings of the spirit, entirely the workings of the Atma. Now what do we have in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad? We have the question and answer session between Gargi and Yajnavalkya. Yajnavalkya is the great sage of the Upanishads. He is the all-knowing one. But in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, you have Gargi continuously questioning Yajnavalkya on everything that he's saying. Why is the earth the way it is? Why is the moon the way it is? Why do winds travel at the speed that they do? What is above the moon? What is the galaxy? What is the cosmic force that we are trying to understand? What is the quality of life? What is the essence of life that we are trying to understand? So searching questions are continuously asked of Yajnavalkya until in the end he says, I don't have any answers to your questions, please stop asking so many questions. Question answer is fundamental to Hinduism, and that is again a fundamental aspect of liberal values, that we are always asking questions. The liberal asks questions. Freedom of speech, the freedom to interrogate, the freedom to ask, the freedom to dissent is fundamental in the Hindu traditional text. what is the Bhagavad Gita? The Bhagavad Gita is essentially an interrogation of God. God is constantly questioned. Arjuna is constantly questioning Krishna. Why should I go into battle? Why should I kill my relatives? Why should I harm family members who I've grown up with? Is it my dharma as a warrior to fight and to try and murder people who I've grown up with, who I have loved, who I have respected, who are my gurujis? Why should I try to kill them? Now, and God, Krishna answers. Now, he doesn't answer through use of, again, through supernatural powers. He doesn't answer through use of magical, godly powers. He answers as a human being. He is constantly questioned. The Bhagavad Gita is an interrogating, questioning document. And that is why, again, Gandhi drew from the Gita the notion of questioning and the notion of constantly interrogating what seems to be unjust principles. So, within these traditions, you find a constant belief in the individual spirit, in individual freedom, and in the power of the individual to question and to dissent, which I believe are ultimately liberal. Now, what was the Bhakti movement? If you look at the Bhakti movement, it was in many ways, I'll quote a little bit about the Bhakti movement. This was a movement that began in the 15th and 16th centuries, which questioned the priesthood and questioned the dominance of a single set of practices and a single set of beliefs. In fact, the Bhakti movement brought forward many saints and thinkers who questioned the beliefs of the time. Let me quote from Kabir. It's all one skin and bone, one piss, one shit, one blood, one meat, from one drop a universe. Who's a Brahmin? Who's a Shudra? So these were the kind of questions that the Bhakti saints were asking at the time. Vivekananda says, the real thing for Hindus over time, across generations, has been spiritual independence or mukti. The Hindu will stand any trial and tribulation as long as their aspiration for mukti is not affected. This is why Hindus have survived in spite of numerous calamities and foreign invasions, because we constantly spoke out, inwardly perhaps, for mukti. Radhakrishnan again writes about the Bhakti movement. It is steeped in individualism. At the heart of Hindu Vedantic philosophy, as well as the Bhakti saints, is a constant belief in individualism and the individual right to speak out against dogma and against inherited practice. Chandidas, a Vaishnavite poet saint of the 14th century, is believed to have said, Shobar upore manush, tahar upore keu nei. The supreme truth is man. Humanism is the supreme truth. There is no God above man. Ramakrishna Paramahansa in the 19th century said, Jato mat, tato pot. There are as many opinions as there are ways to God. So, the Bhakti movement and its inheritors have constantly emphasized the need to go against dogma, the need to go against received wisdom, the need to go against a priesthood if you want to, the freedom of the individual to go against the priesthood. These are the kind of readings one can do if you're interested in finding out the liberal expressions of the liberal spirit and liberal values within the religious sphere, specifically the Hindu religious texts. I would recommend that you read Radhakrishnan on the principal Upanishads, on the Bhagavad Gita, on the Ramayana. There is also a wonderful text by Bruce Lawrence and David Gilmartin called Beyond Turk and Hindu. This is a wonderful book which actually is a set of articles on how the Islamicate and Indic have coexisted for centuries within India, and that it was only the British census takers that when they were creating the census created these monolithic identities of Hindu and Muslim. Before that there was a broader Islamicate and a broader Indic of mixed religions, you know, the Pir Babas, the Sufi saints, the singers, the bauls, the local shrines, the little traditions. These were all mixed up. Who was a Hindu, who was a Muslim, who was a Buddhist, who was a Jain. This was part of the subcontinental supra-canon, which is not divided into Hindu or Muslim or Jain or Sikh, but it was basically a spiritual canon which combined all these features and expressed itself in local saints. You know, you had the shrine of Sai Baba, or the shrine of Satyapir, or the Ajmer Sufi shrine, or in fact the Muslim saints of Tamil Nadu, or the Pir Babas of Bengal. These were all saints and prophets who existed who draw their traditions from the pre-British period and combined Hinduism and Islam and Jainism and all aspects of religion into a kind of a what I call a subcontinental canon, which is not either Hindu or Muslim. I'll read out a little bit from Bruce Lawrence and David Gilmartin, because I think this is a very interesting book, and I think it's important that you read this. It's called Beyond Turk and Hindu, and they demonstrate that before the coming of the British colonial census takers, before identities were irrevocably cast as Muslim and Hindu, there was a transactional, local, patchily integrated world of Islamicate and Indic. This may not have been a secular idyll, but it was an interlinked space of memory, artifact and written text. This world created identities in which the categories of Hindu and Muslim were largely subsumed in more intermingled and localized structures of devotion which combined traditions from all denominations. So there was a tradition in India where these coexisting shrines had a long tradition and were deeply followed. I'm sure in your own homes you would know that there are certain saints and certain prophets who your family may worship, or who may be part of your neighborhood, or who may be part of your community, who straddle both worlds, who straddle both the Hindu and the Islamic world. The most recent example of such a saint, of course, is the Sai Baba of Shirdi, who is worshipped equally by Hindus and Muslims, and according to some traditions, Sai Baba of Shirdi was in fact also a Muslim by birth. So this is again another aspect of coexistence and liberal expressions of coexistence that we can find if we study India's religious traditions.